If you think the movie Slapshot deserved an Oscar, sorry, you're the ultimate hockey fan, and this show is for you. You're listening to Liam McGuire's Ultimate Hockey Show on 1310 News.
Okie dokie, welcome back. 11:35. Thanks for your patience. I know we had to get to the news, so good job by Elizabeth Zogalis getting that done. Should mention Dave Gross here for Liam McGuire for today. Liam is back in the regular chair next week, and he's all revved up. Going to have some stories, I'm sure, about his trip to Ireland, golfing, and Guinness vacation, from what I understand. So I'm sure that'll be fascinating radio. I'll be listening. For sure. We are going to talk some hockey. Donnie Brennan's going to join us from the Ottawa Sun next hour. And Chuck Spider-Jones, some boxing and some hockey. The famed Golden Gloves pugilist who actually trained some of the former Toronto Maple Leafs in the art of pugilism on the ice. So we'll dip into that. Right now, though, we have our next guest waiting, I do believe. Pleased to be joined by the chairman and founder of ExposNation, Mr. Matthew Ross. Matthew, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Fantastic. Listen, thanks first off for taking some time. I know it's a holiday weekend, and you're probably looking outside going, what am I doing inside on the phone? But
I'm just getting a bit of my ear.
Pardon me?
There we go. All right. Heard a commercial. Sorry about that.
Okay, there we go. All right. Where do we stand as far as... I know Major League Baseball is saying all the right things at this point. Warren Cromartie saying it's not a matter of if the Expos come back, it's a matter of when. Where do we sit in the process?
Well, it really is fantastic. The one thing that people should take note of is that there is a constant, ongoing dialogue with Major League Baseball and the various entities here in Montreal that are continuing to ready the market for Major League Baseball. The channel of communication is constantly open. They're well aware of things that are going on. They're constantly saying, keep going, continue the work that you're doing. And so that's the positive thing. Behind the scenes, there are some large entities that have kicked the tires, that have expressed interest. No one's willing to go public right now. There really isn't a reason to do that. But the marketplace is very, very energized about the return of baseball, and the people that need to be energized about it, at least some of them, are so.
Now, Bud Selig, from what I've read and what I've heard, was not. He didn't really want to talk about the possibility of Montreal getting a baseball team, but the new commissioner seems to be on board. At least he's saying the right things.
Yeah, Rob Manfred, one of our members from our committee actually had a chance to speak with him for a few minutes back at Cooperstown for the Pedro Martinez induction. We had a couple of buses there with fans. And, but kind of off the cuff, kind of just said, well aware of who you guys are, what you're doing, keep up the good work. Manfred's very progressive. He's a guy that realizes that the international markets like Mexico, like Canada, elsewhere, of course, they had Australia a couple of years ago, are lucrative to Major League Baseball. And the benefit to putting a team back in these different markets, in the case of Montreal, returning there, far outweigh the negatives. And so he certainly knows the history of Montreal. He's seen what's happened for the preseason games the last couple of years, and he's all for it, seemingly. Now, the question is, how is that going to happen? Right now, Montreal seems to be a trump card with Tampa Bay, but certainly expansion is definitely a possibility.
Well, there's a lot of roadblocks, from what I understand, in possibly relocating Tampa. They have a use agreement with Tropicana Field until 2027, I think it is. Can they get out of that, and what would that look like?
Well, the lease agreement, as I understand, there is penalty that you want to pay if you want to get out of it, but the penalty goes down a year as you go through the 2027 annual lease. Tampa Bay, for its part, is actually a profitable franchise. Regardless of what the attendance is, they have certainly strong TV deals. There's a lot of money in Major League Baseball right now with MLB.TV and their advanced media that all the teams have a partial ownership in. So there is money in there. But expansion is very much a reality and a possibility. It's a situation where they have 15 teams right now in both leagues, so you have to play interleague every single day. And the appetite, I think, for that is waning a little bit. So ideally, you put one team in each league, and I think it is coming in the next few years.
Charlotte, San Antonio, and Las Vegas would seem to be the other locales that would be considered for a relocation. Where do the Montreal Expos fit if you're going to number those 1 to 4?
I think you also have to look at Portland, Oregon as well as another area, but they may have an issue with zoning kind of with Seattle. But Montreal's right now at the top of the list. No other market right now has done feasibility studies, has hosted major league preseason games to the extent of Montreal. So they are very much at number one. The issue, though, is you need a number two, and I think that right now is more of a concern for Major League Baseball than the Montreal market.
The chairman and founder of ExposNation, Matthew Ross, joining us on the line, talking about the potential for baseball to return to Montreal. I have to mention that I am a Montreal native, and I'm old enough to remember going to Jerry Park as a very, very young man and going through some good years at Olympic Stadium and some not so good years. But I really think the appetite is there. But Matthew, I'm going to ask you this. Not just in Montreal, it seems like everywhere I go, I'm seeing more and more Expos paraphernalia, whether they are ball caps or their jerseys. But It seems like the rest of the country is pretty enamored with this idea.
Well, I think it's a perfect storm, really. Anything nostalgia in the 80s is kind of hip and cool these days.
Yeah.
So you have that light blue, you have that really funny logo, which is so unique and so distinctive. It's actually top 5 right now in apparel in Major League Baseball. So it's ahead of most actual teams, and it's being purchased everywhere. I was in Boston last year, and I tried to go, to a local apparel store, and I said, "Where are your Expo stuff?" He said, "Oh, we're sold out." So it really is a phenomenon, and as it relates to what you're seeing, Montreal was a regional team. They drew from Ottawa, they drew from upstate New York, they drew from Vermont, and that's what we're trying to do as well, is show that the territory is very much expansive. I remember going to Ottawa Lynx games, and I loved that when you had the AAA team there.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned New York State and Vermont. My dad has a cottage on Lake Champlain, about 30 minutes south of Plattsburgh. And the only stations back in the day you could get were, of course, from Burlington or Plattsburgh. And they would always lead their sports, not with the Yankees, not with the Boston Red Sox, but it'd be the Montreal Expos. So you're bang on. I mean, the interest from the communities around Montreal, not just Montreal, would seem to be, hey, we want baseball back.
That's exactly it. In the heyday of attendance, you had buses coming up from the U.S. all the time. And you think about it logically, from an 18, a 19, a 20-year-old's perspective, just over the border, you can't drink yet. You come to Montreal, you can certainly have a beer at a game. Yeah,
that was the reason. That was one of the advantages of being brought up in Montreal, that's for sure. All right, where do we stand on the biggest issue, the big elephant in the room, the stadium? They obviously don't want to go back to Olympic Stadium. Where would that... Ideally, if Montreal gets a team and they have to put a shovel in the ground first, they want to build something downtown. I've heard about the Peel Basin possibly being a location. Where do you see a stadium being built, if at all?
Yeah, there's several locations that they're looking at, but the one that you did mention is probably the one that makes the most sense right now, just because of the amount of real estate. And that's it right now, is you need a downtown stadium. People think about 2,000 fans in the stands, but there were so many different factors that led to a decrease in attendance. One of which, of course, is the climate up here in Canada. You want to be outside in the summer and not in a dome. And so you absolutely need a stadium, and specifically downtown, to be able to go and enjoy the nightlife after a game. And that's part of the experience that the Canadians have, of course, and so they need that with the Expos.
Now, tell me about your adopting the Expo Facebook page, because back in the day, what was it, 2 years ago, Matthew, or 3 years ago, you took it over, and there were like 3 fans, and now you're up to about 170,000 followers?
Yeah, something like that. We took it over just around, probably I would say late 2011, something like that. There were about 100,000 fans. It's sitting right around 165,000 fans at the moment, and it really that was sort of the beginning of our organization. We're a nonprofit corporation which was formed in 2013, but we've done some great work on the ground, just sort of interacting and engaging the fan base. 1,000 fans in Toronto in 2013, and a couple of pitch and catch rallies with former players we've had in the city. We've been a partner with these preseason games and trying to promote and put people in the stands. So it's been a heck of a ride, and as we get closer and closer to something maybe coming back, it's certainly very exciting.
ExposNation founder Matthew Ross joining us on the line here at 1310 News. Got to ask you this: why do you care?
I did the unthinkable. I grew up in Montreal as a baseball fan first over hockey. And, unlike hockey, I find that baseball, because of the slower pace of the game, it really lends itself to camaraderie, chatting with family, and dissecting a game. And I miss that. I miss going to a game and talking strategy in the stands or chatting with your grandpa. It was a way to relate, and sitting on the balcony in the summer, it was a way of life. And so I have 2 kids. I'd love to be able to, show that and experience that with them. And, we've taken them to games, but obviously it's not the same when you don't have a rooting interest on the field. 4
million people in the greater Montreal area live there. It's the largest city in North America without a baseball team. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really nothing else to say other than that. I mean, it's a metropolis that, when done right, if a team is playing in a downtown stadium, if you have corporate buy-in, if you have solid local ownership, there's no reason that it can't work. You look at cities like Atlanta and Cleveland; they were down to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 fans a game before they got their new stadiums and a competitive team on the field. And the same thing could have happened to them that happened here in Montreal, and everything went wrong in our case, unfortunately. That's another discussion for another day. But certainly, there's the opportunity with the growing Baseball Quebec numbers of kids playing to support a team here.
Warren Cromartie is one of the front runners, one of the big names that's involved in bringing baseball back to Montreal. Who are some of the other former Expos or baseball players at all who have jumped on board with this?
Well, he got the ball rolling with the Montreal Baseball Project. It's morphed into the Montreal, the Home Run Project, which is a consortium or a group that includes the Warren Cromartie's group, Ernst & Young, a law firm called BCF, and the Montreal Board of Trade. And so you have figures from these groups that are all sort of in chatting with Major League Baseball. In terms of other players, there's been players that have come in and out of the city for events. They've all kind of lent their support to a team being here. At a gala last year, Andre Dawson was quoted as saying, even though he works for the Marlins, he said, "I'd love to work for a team here in Montreal." Tim Raines has kind of said the same thing as well. He currently works for the Blue Jays in the minor leagues. So there's no shortage of players that would love to be involved here. Denny Boucher is the pitching coach at Team Canada, and he does some scouting for the Yankees. So there would certainly be a former Expos presence here. There's no question.
You're a Montreal sportscaster. What's the pulse as far as following what the Toronto Blue Jays are doing right now? Because I was mentioning in the first segment that it's pretty well off the charts through the rest of the country. But do you guys talk a lot about the Blue Jays and their run? And it hasn't been 20 years since they've been this close, this late in the year?
It's really a mixed bag. It's interesting. For myself personally, I'm indifferent. I treat them like the Leafs, but it's hard to separate that for me. That and the fact that the ownership at the time voted to contract the Expos. They were also responsible for, some of the regional rights being taken away from Montreal, which helped them kind of go into their downturn. So not a fan necessarily of them. I don't really wish them ill will either, so sort of indifferent. In terms of the marketplace, it's really a mixed bag. You have people wearing Blue Jay stuff. The games are on in French here on television. So there is a section that's certainly rooting for them, particularly with Russell Martin, someone who spent time in Montreal as a kid. So there is that connection. There are others that feel this, what I had said, feel that way. And then there's third that basically is biding their time. It's sort of bandwagoners who are latching on to someone a team that has a lot of coverage right now and easy accessible games. But I do believe that, if a team was here, you wouldn't really see a Blue Jays presence here anymore.
What do you have against the Leafs? That's like picking on Tiny Tim.
Well, you're a Habs fan. You can't be a Leafs fan, right, in Montreal?
I grew up in Montreal, and I told this story on the air, and it won't be as long and boring as the first time I told it, but I have two older brothers. They picked the Habs. I had to pick another team, so I had to pick the Boston Bruins and watch them lose in the 70s, time after, there's Ken Dryden, blah, 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 blah. So I have sour memories of growing up in Montreal.
Well, you got your cup in 2011, I guess, right?
Yes, except by then I was not a Bruins fan, so that's another story. I'm impartial. I'm like Switzerland.
Okay, fair enough.
I like all. Hey, Matthew, really appreciate your time, taking a little extra time here today on this holiday weekend. But best of luck with this project, and we'll certainly be keeping track as we motor along. And give me a year. Just throw something out there. What do you think? Within 5 years? Within 10 years?
Well, a couple of years ago, I said within 7 years, and I've been on the record and quoted it, and people thought I was crazy. I think we're right on track for that. I think 5 years from now.
Okay. Appreciate your time, pal.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Enjoy your weekend. There he goes, Matthew Ross.